Okay, are you ready for me?
Yep, so thank you for signing up for today's webinar. Our topic is reading basics, and our presenter is Mary Bechtel.
Hi, everybody. I am excited to have the opportunity to talk with you a little bit about reading basics today. What I'm going to be doing is really giving kind of an overview of the big ideas in reading and sharing that information with you so that you can have information that you can hopefully use in your own work or support of your own children and who are learning to read. Um, I am not an actual reading specialist. I want to clarify that. What I have been doing, though, for the last 8 years is serving as an educational consultant. I worked for almost 7 years for Michigan's Integrated Behavior and Learning Support Initiative, and they went ahead and put me through all the same training that they do put their reading experts through. And one of the other parts of my job was to focus on bringing information to families through school-family partnership. And so what I've had the wonderful opportunity to do over the last several years is take some of this really rich, wonderful information that I've had the opportunity to learn about alongside some of the top reading specialists in the state and sort of work on translating it a little bit in order to bring it to families. And so that's what we're going to be doing today is taking information that some people can spend years and years learning to perfect in the classroom and talking about how some of those ideas could be used at home as well. So I just wanted to point that out. What we're going to do first is talk about what parents usually hear about reading, what the big ideas in reading are, when your child should be learning those skills, a little bit about how your children should be learning those skills, what you can do to support your own child's reading development, or if you are a professional and you're working with others, what they can, information you can give to them so that they could use this information with their own children, and what you can do if you're working with a child who's struggling with their reading. This information comes from a variety of sources, primarily through my Blissy. Some of these slides are slides that we just took directly out of our trainings that we facilitated with educators. The same thing goes for some of these other sources. Stuart Greenberg is the Associate Director of Florida Center for Reading Research. Anita Archer is a reading consultant. She was affiliated with the University of Oregon for many years, and they are some of the top educators of educators out there. They have had wonderful, marvelous results with regard to outcomes for children. And so again, we're just taking this information that's usually shared with educators and sharing it directly with you. Now, typical advice, we're just going to go ahead and get started. And you've probably heard these kinds of things if you have children, but what families usually hear as far as how they should support their child's reading is make sure you have lots of books in your house, read aloud to your child as much as possible, turn off that TV, encourage your child to read every day. Really try to make reading a privilege, not a punishment of any sort, and just get kids excited about reading, getting them looking at books and thinking about reading on a regular basis. And this is all very, very, very good advice. These are all things that absolutely should be done and hopefully are being done in as many homes as possible. And along with some good sound reading instruction at school, this actually is enough for some children. And they become ravenous readers, and that takes them through the rest of the day. But what if you have a child who's a struggling reader? Is there anything else you can do besides just continuing to read with your child and having a lot of books in the house and that kind of thing? And the answer is yes, there's actually lots of things that can be done. The first thing, and this is what we're going to spend some of the time talking about today, is educating yourself about the science of reading so that you know what it is that your child should be learning and how you can support their development of reading skills in your own home, and even advocating for that in development and support of the development of those skills at your child's school. So first of all, we're going to talk about, well, what is reading exactly? When we delve into the science of reading, we actually realize that it's not a simple thing to teach reading, even though some kids can seem to be able to sit down with books and with enough repetition kind of crack that code and start reading in almost what seems like a magical way. What we know is that there's a lot of very, very complex processes that are happening in the brain in order to allow a person to look at a symbol on a page and be able to understand that symbol and extract meaning from that symbol. And so the kind of technical definition is that reading is the process of simultaneously extracting and constructing meaning through the interaction and involvement with written language. And so it really means that you can not only develop and interpret what those symbols on the page mean, but that you can derive meaning from those symbols, and that you can do that in a pretty quickly as you're moving forward. There's some big ideas in reading, and these have been described over the course of about 30 years of reading research. And we know that each of these big ideas are things that need to be happening in order for anyone to read an alphabetic language, which is what we have. We have letters that correspond to sounds and then are put down on a page in a series in order to make up sentences and so forth. And we're going to talk about each one of these things, each one of these big ideas, as we move through our hour together, and how important they are and what we can do to help support the development of these skills with our own children. Now, phonemic awareness is the understanding of that words are made of sounds. You can do this with your eyes shut, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a few minutes. Phonics is the relationship between those spoken sounds and printed letters. You have to have your eyes open and be looking at letters in order to be able to do that. Fluency is reading automatically. It's sort of like when you're able to drive a car and you don't have to think about it anymore. When you're a fluent reader, you don't have to sit and think about, oh, what does that letter stand for, or how do I sound this out? You're able to just do it automatically without thinking about it. Vocabulary is the knowledge of words and their meanings. And comprehension is your ability to understand, remember, and communicate all that you've been able to read. It's that making meaning part. We're going to dive into each of these in more detail here now. Phonemic awareness, then, is, as I mentioned, the ability to hear and identify and manipulate the individual sounds in spoken words. So children learn this skill before they read print, and that's very important to remember, is that in order for a child to be able to read words, they really need to have some language acquisition. They need to be able to hear in spoken words, that spoken words are made up of different kinds of sounds. And so if you have a child who is experiencing difficulty with hearing, I know that we've seen children who have come into the schools and have had chronic ear infections, or they're hearing impaired. That requires a whole different set of supports if you have a hearing impaired child. And the traditional way of going about teaching reading isn't going to, work real well, since we do have a phonemic means sound-based language and print, alphabet. But in a child who is not hearing impaired, this is something that needs to be a part of just the work that's happening in everyone's home before a child even picks up a book. And what we do know is that if children aren't aware of the sounds in words, it's a core deficit for reading disabilities. It means that children are going to have a very hard time looking at a word and being able to read it if they can't break those sounds down. And so children who do have good phonemic awareness skills, they can hear and say rhyming patterns in words. And so if you're able to say what rhymes with the word cat, sat, pat, rat, they're able to understand that. They recognize when words begin with the same sound. They can segment or break apart words into the component sounds. And so that means if you have the word sat, they understand that that word sat is made up of the sounds s-at. And they can also then blend those word parts together into words. So instead of just saying s-at, they can say s-at, sat. Now, why is this important? Really, it's important because there's two things that we talk about in the reading world. One is phonemes, which is those sounds that are made up in spoken words, and graphemes are their symbols in print. And so a grapheme is a letter or a set of letters that represent a sound. So for example, TH represents the sound th, as in the, or th, there. Now, the best early predictor of reading difficulty in kindergarten or first grade is the inability to segment words or syllables into constituent sounds. So that means if a child is unable to break apart those words or blend them back together, it's predictive of how much difficulty they're going to have reading later. And if you have a child, again, who's not typically developing, but their language is developing, or their language development is delayed, that's going to need to be worked on first before a child is put into a first grade classroom and working on segmenting words. And so if a child is hopefully being included in their general education classroom, that language development is really going to need to be a robust part of their IEP plan, so that they can be developing that skill, and which often can also happen in a general education classroom as children are being exposed to rich language in that room. Now, we also know that if kids do have these skills, then we could start seeing word reading gains in first and second grade. The kids just read better. Another interesting thing about phonemic awareness, which just sort of makes common sense, is that if you can break words apart and put them back together and you're aware of those sounds, children learn not only how to read better, but spell better, which means that then they can write more effectively as well. And so I know I've seen this. I have 2 children, and I've seen this with them, that one has pretty strong phonemic awareness skills. The other one has struggled some with some different sounds. For example, he confuses short I, which is I, and short E sounds, which is eh. He really struggles almost hearing the difference in those sounds, remembering the difference in those sounds, and as a result, spelling with those particular sounds is a struggle for him. And so we often see him kind of mixing those up. So that's our task that we're practicing. So for example, something that you could do with your child is just in the car when you're driving somewhere, when you are at the dinner table, if you're working on just cleaning things up around the house, you could say we're going to play a say the word game. I'll say the sounds, you say the word. And so you can make yourself a little note card of just simple words that have simple sounds in them, like am, the word am. And you just say, listen, am, what's the word? Am. And then you can repeat with other words. Now this is the strategy that is comes from Anita Archer, and this is exactly what it is that's being taught to kindergarten and first grade teachers, primarily kindergarten teachers, who are focusing on helping kids develop these strategies, but obviously it's something that can be done at home very, very easily. Another example that you could do at home is segmenting words into sounds. This is called smooth segmenting, again another Anita Archer strategy. But what you do is you just put your fists together. And again, this could be something where you do it with 10 words at the dinner table. You put your fists together and you get ready to stretch the word. So you say the word is fin. What word? The child repeats it. Those italicized letters means the child repeats it. And then you stretch it out. You say in, while you're pulling your fists away from each other. So you should have your fists maybe a foot away from each other at this point, and then you say shrink it, fin, and you push your fists back together. This helps the children practice and think about what those different sounds are and how they fit together. And again, you just can make up a quick list of simple words that have some of the same, some in the same word families, like the one listed below: sit, list, fish, trip. Those all have short I sounds in them. A third example is separate segmenting. This is a little bit more difficult, but it's something that is, again, could be done at the dinner table or in the car. It says we're going to say the sounds in a word. Put your fist up in the air, and then put your finger up for each sound, and you ask the child to do this with you. So you say, put your fist up there, and the word is sat. What word? Sat. The child says sat, and then you say, what's the first sound? You put your number 1 finger up. Next sound, ah. Last sound, t. So you should have 3 fingers up. You put 1 finger up each time you're saying the sounds. And that helps, again, the child understand that the word is made up of different sounds. These are just little games that you can play to help develop phonemic awareness, and it helps you to start moving into the next strategy, or the next big idea, skill, which is phonics. This is also called alphabetic principle. But phonics instruction teaches the children that there's relationships between those sounds, like the ones we just practiced, and the letters of written language. And the goal is to help them learn to use that relationship as they encounter new words that they don't know, as they are encountering words in order to figure them out. And many children need systematic and explicit phonics instruction before they're able to learn to read. What we know is about between 40 and 50% of children can pick some of this stuff up just by a lot of repetition. They kind of crack that code on their own. About 40% of children need systematic explicit phonics instruction in order to be able to read. But all children benefit from this instruction, particularly, again, when it comes to reading and writing. So in order to teach letter-sound associations, just, if you're reading a very simple book, like The Cat in the Hat, you can pick out some simple words and say, this word is sat. You point to the word, and then what you do is you point to an underlined grapheme, or you can just point to a letter if it's something that's not underlined. And then you can just say, this sound is ah. So if you're pointing to that a grapheme, again, is a letter or a set of letters that represent a sound. And so you can say, this sound is ah. What sound? Ah. Or you can point to the isolated grapheme, again, that letter A, which represents the sound ah, and say, this sound is ah. Say it with me, ah, and then ask the child what it is, and the child will repeat back ah. You could make up your own little cards that where you would underline, some simple graphemes. You could ask your child's teacher to, what kinds of graphemes they're working on at school, what letter-sound associations they're working on at school, so that you'd be able to do some of that work at home as well. And that's particularly important because then you're working on the same strategies that they're working on at school. Now, fluency is the ability to read words quickly and accurately. And again, this is like if you're learning to play a piano and you're able to play the notes on the piano without stopping and thinking about it. If you think about a person who's learning to play the piano, they sometimes will have to hunt and peck for the notes, and it might sound a little choppy. That's also how beginning emerging readers often sound too when they're reading. It's important to keep in mind, though, that sometimes even teachers will think that the word fluency means reading fast. It doesn't mean reading fast. It means reading fast enough to get through the book. Just like playing the piano, if you're fluent with it, you're not going to be playing it too slowly, but it's not speed reading. Just like you wouldn't want to play the piano so fast that you couldn't, have some rhythm to it. And so we really want to help make sure that we're understanding that fluency is really just being able to do things automatically, but fast enough that you're making progress getting through some written text. What we do know is that repeated and monitored oral reading improves reading fluency. What this means is having your child read to you. Something that's easy to do at home is at your child's reading level, which you can find out from your child's teacher. I encourage you to ask. Is have your child read a page and then you read a page, or if your child's not yet reading, reading a word and then you read the word. Things like that, so that they start getting accustomed to that kind of a routine. Now, fluency changes depending upon what readers are reading. If you're a pretty casual reader, you might sit down and read a novel, maybe a romance novel or something and read just fine and fly through the pages. But if you're going to sit down and read a medical text, your fluency might become a little bit more choppy. You might read much more slowly. The same thing happens with children as they are learning new and more complex vocabulary. So if you have a child that's been reading stories at school and then they start reading more what we call informational text or books that are about, you know, nonfiction subject matter, maybe a science book or something of that nature, then, you know, their fluency might change a little bit and it might be a little bit harder for them to get through, a little bit more choppy. But fluent readers, what we know that they do is they make connections between the ideas and the text or the words and their background knowledge. And this is something that you can do at home as well, is just ask them if they're reading about something at school, what do you know about that already? Good readers think about new ideas based on what they already know and then expand those ideas. And so that's just something that, a question you can ask your child. Fluent readers also can divide text into meaningful chunks. And if you think about this, if you have a child who encounters a word that they don't know, I know that we had this come up when my kids were learning to read about dinosaurs. They always wanted to read about dinosaurs. Well, I was having to read to them, and I was encountering words that I did not know at all. And so my fluency was not as strong, even though I'm a strong reader. I had to figure out how to pronounce Parasaurolophus. And I didn't even know what a Parasaurolophus was until I, you know, read some of these books and saw some of the pictures and was able to put that together. But I broke those words down in my own mind and said Parasaurolophus, put it back together, blended it together, just like we did with simpler words with our fists, and then put it together. But fluent readers don't have to concentrate on decoding words. They're just already, that decoding happens so quickly, that phonemic awareness and phonics piece happens so quickly that they're not thinking about it. So they can instead think about what that text means. Comprehension is the last big idea in reading, and what that really means is it's sort of the goal. It's the whole purpose of being able to read is, you know, what is this book about? Either to, you know, for enjoyment, understanding a story, the plot that the author intends, or for information about something, whether it's a textbook or as employers are starting to ask for, having people who can read instructional manuals and things of that nature and be able to understand what it is that they're reading so they can use the information. And this is something that can also be, this strategy, or excuse me, this skill of comprehension can be helped by using specific comprehension strategies. Asking children, do you understand what you're reading? And can you summarize that for me? And so if you've helped your children and had some time set aside for them to read at home, just asking them to summarize for you. What is it that you're reading? Even if it's a very, very simple book, even if it's just a Dr. Seuss book, you can ask them, what's this story about? So that it prompts them to start thinking, do I know what I'm reading? Do I understand what I'm reading? Vocabulary is also critically important as a big idea, because what we know is that increases in vocabulary generate increases in academic achievement. And this again goes right back to before children ever begin school, helping to define words for them and really speaking to them about what they're seeing, describing what they're seeing, talking about things that are even seen on TV, explaining to them what things are, because what we know is that if children are able to decode well, but they don't know what the meanings of the words are that they're reading, then it's hard for the child to make connections. I remember taking Spanish in college, and Spanish is a purely phonetic language, meaning that every sound in the alphabet corresponds to a sound that's on the written page. It's a simple language. So once I learned what those sounds were in Spanish, I was able to sit down and read very, very well. And anyone who heard me would think that I was, you know, fluent in Spanish, but I didn't know what the words meant. I didn't have a strong Spanish vocabulary, and so my comprehension then was terrible because I just didn't know what those words, what the definitions of those words were. And so we want to try to help children understand what's going on around them and using words to describe them so that they can develop a strong vocabulary. And we also can be helping them as we're reading to them by doing simple things like, as you're reading a story to the children, when you come across, or to your children, when you come across a word that you're not sure if they would know, you just define it. So for example, if we were reading that first sentence, we could say, children learn the meanings of most words indirectly through conversation. A conversation means two or more people talking together. Read alouds and reading on their own. So you can throw a definition into what you're reading, then just keep reading the sentence as you're moving along with your child, and they're going to be developing then some vocabulary skills just by listening to you read to them and making some of those definitions. Another thing that's important that you can do is if you're watching TV or anything like that, just helping children describe what they see. And watching the kinds of things, if you are going to be having them watch TV that are about the world, documentary type things, that age-appropriate documentary type things, so that if they're learning about the earth or other cultures or things like that, they're able to have some words for that. Another thing that's important to do is oral reading of material above their independent reading level. What that means is you're reading material to them that's harder, basically, than what it is that they're able to read on their own. You want them to be reading on their own, but you can help them expand their vocabulary by reading to them things that they're not specifically understanding when they look at the words. Teaching targeted words, that's similar. You can do it the way we talked about earlier, where you point out words and their meanings as you're reading aloud to them, or you can just find out if there's any vocabulary words that the kids are learning at home, or at school, and then just really trying to use those words as you are going about your day. You could post some of them. I know that I've seen families take sticky notes and have their vocabulary words for that week posted on the front door or on the mirror in the bathroom, just as a prompt to use those words. And if you have a child who is, who has language delays, then this is something that can be really helpful in order to give them a lot of repetition with some of those same words. When you teach word meaning, you can use context clues and learning word parts when you're really trying to think about vocabulary. And this is one of the big differences between some different kinds of thoughts, different individuals who teach reading. Context clues are important as long as that's not the only strategy that a child has to figure out what a word is. And by context clues, we mean if you're reading a sentence and you come across a word that you don't know, if you're able to decode that word or break it apart and figure out how to say it, but you don't still know what that word means because you just have never heard it before, even if you're saying it correctly, it's thinking about what else might be happening in the text or the story or the whatever it is you're reading to help you understand what that meaning is. So those are just some different kinds of things to be thinking about. What we do know is that explicit instruction, meaning we're going to really teach you exactly what, how to increase your vocabulary as a student, must occur with multiple opportunities for practice and application. So if you put those sticky notes up and you're focused on teaching your child some specific words, you want to make sure that you are using those words more than just once or over and over. And this is why it's so helpful if you can get those vocabulary lists from the teacher, because your child's getting more opportunities for practice and use at home, and it's the more repetition the better when it comes to some of these words so that they stick. Students also need to visualize, connect, and use their senses, have some meaningful opportunities to do that. So when you're teaching vocabulary, you can go online and look at, if you have access to a computer, to pictures of different things from around the world, and just really use your words to describe those things so that the children can visualize in their minds what it is that that word means. And I think using the refrigerator or a wall in their child's room as a word wall, sticky notes on mirrors or doors, or just really putting things up in a regular, familiar place, and then switching those words out every week. Setting aside time every day in the schedule to have those daily read-alouds is really important, and that can sometimes be hard with how hectic things can be. But even if it's 15 minutes a day, that's really, really important to have with children. Now, these 5 skills, I'm just going to pull these all up, really work kind of on different things. Phonemic awareness, phonics, and fluency really focus then on identifying words accurately and fluently. You can identify them, you can break them apart and put them back together, and that is necessary in order to be able to learn to read, but it's not sufficient. You do need to also be able to construct meaning from those words once they've been identified, and that's what vocabulary and comprehension really does. Now, it's also important to keep in mind that certain skills are critical to master at different points in time. What this chart shows, which I just really like this particular chart that comes from Simmons, Camino, and Harn, and Coyne, they helped to tease out through some of the research that they've done when it is that children are learning these different kinds of skills, typically developing children. So usually what's happening is before kindergarten even happens and during kindergarten, kids are getting instruction on that phonological or phonemic awareness, the part you can do with your eyes closed, what the rhyming, what sounds are in words. And that usually goes up until about the middle of 1st grade. Simultaneously, at the same time, they're focusing on just getting introduced to certain letters and very simple words. It's not really until the middle of 1st grade or even sometime, well, about the middle of 1st grade, that then you start working on words that have more than one syllable, reading words like therefore, or something like that. That's even a big word, but just, more than something along the lines of cat, sat, hat, bat. Now, before, again, children just even start school and really moving up into some of the upper elementary grades, kids are, vocabulary and comprehension initially are taught through listening. So that's where, when you do those oral read-alouds, when you're reading to your child and helping them think about what they've been reading or what they're hearing you read, thinking about and defining some of those vocabulary words, that happens primarily through listening until about 2nd grade. Then it starts to happen more through their own reading, and they start just getting more fluent, which is what that automaticity means, so they're able to start reading more. One of the things that we talk about, again, in the reading world is that grades kindergarten to the first half of 3rd grade, children are learning to read. After about 3rd grade, children are reading to learn. And this is why it's so critical for children to learn to read by the 3rd grade, because if they don't have these 5 big ideas down and they haven't mastered some of these skills, the text and words that they're going to be reading become more and more complex. The vocabulary words become more complex, and they start learning and getting definitions about those words by reading. So if they don't have some of these basic skills down, then we start to see the gap widen in student achievement between students who can read and who can't read. I wanted to just show you some of the resources that we have, and actually we kind of did this already, but I just want to point them out to you a little bit more so that you are familiar with them. If you go to the Michigan Alliance for Families website, the tab that says Education, if you scroll down here to where it says Reading, whoops, Well, let me go back up there. There is a set of resources that you can take home and read in even more depth some of the things that we're talking about today. But there's an idea toolkit, if you look right here, and reading instruction checklist. And what it does is it really just talks about these 5 big ideas in a little bit more detail, or it could be serve as a reminder as you're thinking about what it is that your child needs in order to read. And so those 5 key skills are just reiterated here. That reading skill progression slide that we talked about is here. And then there also is a link to the Michigan College and Career Readiness Standards, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. And as we move through the rest of the webinar, we're going to touch on some of these different pieces here. How will the teacher and I know if my child's learning these skills, and what if my child hasn't learned these skills? There are more resources here for you. There's some questions parents can ask about reading improvement if you're concerned about your child's reading abilities or level. And then let's read together how to become your child's reading coach, things that you can do online with your child, but also just how to be reading with them. But this is a really nice set of resources that Michigan Alliance has put together for you in order to help you keep moving forward with some of this. And so that's the link. Now, we're going to switch a little bit to, those are some things you can do at home. What do we hope is happening in schools with regard to reading instruction? The first thing is that those 5 big ideas really need to be systematically and explicitly taught, and we're hoping that that should happen. And schools then should measure where each child is performing on each of those skills, or with regard to each of those skills. And there's really several different types of assessment. The first one is formative assessment. And this is really kind of a first alert. This is something that in an effective school, teachers every single week, sometimes every day, are assessing or trying to figure out how's this child doing with today's assignment or this week's assignment. And it helps them really identify which children might need intervention just right there in their own rooms. Diagnostic assessment is really used to give a more in-depth view. If you do universal screening up here and you find, oh, I'm sorry. Let me back up. I was looking at the formative assessment, or formative assessment is missing off of here, so that should kind of be right up here. Formative assessment is really something that's done just every week. So for an example of that would be a teacher might have kids read to her every week. She might be listening to them read 3 times a week during the regular reading group. About 3 times a year, I apologize, about 3 times a year, children need to really be screened, formally screened. And in a school with effective reading programs in place, they'll screen every child in the building in order to determine how are children doing with regard to where they're supposed to be on these skills here. And so on that chart, if you find that a child is not performing really where they need to be at a particular time or grade level, then you can go in and dig deeper and do some more diagnostic testing to say why. Which skills specifically is a child maybe not mastering? Is it a phonemic awareness issue? Is it a phonics issue? Is it a fluency issue? Because how a child is going to be supported is going to be dependent upon which specific skills the child is needing to develop. And so diagnostic testing is a little bit more in-depth to help you provide what the intervention plan should be. Once a plan has been developed and you know a struggling reader where it is that they're struggling, with which skills exactly it is they're struggling, we want to make sure that we're determining if they're making progress with the plan in which we put in place. And then finally, evaluative or outcomes assessments are really intended to say, are we reaching our goals? And so a lot of times those kinds of assessments will be done maybe once a year, like the MEEP, for example, or some other type of high-stakes exam. So the teachers can say, have we accomplished our goals, or even the district can be looking at their curriculum. As far as how the importance of this is really saying we need to put something in place. As benchmarks assessments or those screeners need to be put in place so we can identify who needs support. We can do diagnostic data or assessment to validate the need support and dig deeper, and also to help us figure out what it is that we need to do so we can plan support. That support needs to be implemented, and then it needs to be evaluated for effectiveness. And that's what progress monitoring really does, is it says, hey, is the plan that we put in place really going to, is it working or not? And it gives you the opportunity then to adjust instruction if needed to be. Now, as part of an IEP, it's really important that the team identify your child's benchmarks or learning targets with regard to reading, and it's helpful to actually reference those 5 big ideas or those 5 skills so that you're able to say, you know, my child has a phonemic awareness issue, or my child has a phonics issue, or my child has you know, some deficits with fluency, so that you can know exactly what it is that you need to be focusing on, and so the goals are written specific to the skills that need to be supported. Now, with regard to screening, and even with some diagnostic work, some schools use DIBELS. Other schools use AIMSweb or different kinds of assessments, but these types of assessments focus on those 5 big ideas or those 5 big skills. They break it down and can help tease out which skills a child needs to work on. If your school is not using DIBELS or AIMSweb or a assessment program like that, then what's important is to just, and we'll talk about this in a minute more in depth, but what are those skills that my child is needing to strengthen? Thankfully, with the passing of our Common Core State Standards initiative in this state, the Common Core State Standards has really focused on teasing some of this out as well, and asking teachers to make sure that they're teaching these 5 big ideas, especially in the early grades. Now, and this is a wonderful, wonderful thing because it really is based on research, and it's saying we really want to make sure that our teachers are teaching what we know from 30 years of research without any doubt that these 5 big ideas need to be taught. The tricky thing is that if you have a child who's older, who's a struggling reader, who's not in 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade, the Common Core State Standards are built upon one another. They're cumulative, and so that means that the standards that teachers are teaching in 5th grade assume that a child has mastered the earlier skills. So if you have a child in the 6th grade who's still struggling some with letter-sound combinations, blending and segmenting letters, or even you know, had language delays or that kind of thing and didn't get that phonemic awareness that they needed, the reading instruction that's happening in 3rd and 4th grade isn't going to be focusing on these skills, yet they're required for reading. And so this is where it's important to know about these kinds of skills and what this reading progression looks like, because just because you have a child who's in 5th grade doesn't mean that they've mastered these, and you might need to come back to them somehow. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to pull out your kindergarten book, because they're going to have some stronger vocabulary just because they've been around longer. And so it really requires you know, some intervention that's going to be targeted to bringing them along and getting them caught up with those skills. With regard to progress monitoring, it's also important that we think about what is it that's happening And how is that progress going to be communicated to me as a parent? If you find out that your child is having some problems with decoding, pulling words apart and putting them back together, you want to find out, is my child getting better? And one of the ways that you can do that is to ask, is to ask for that data. What are my child's reading scores on a regular, each week? How are you measuring my child's, reading progress? When are you going to share that information with me? And then just graphing it so that you can say, is my child getting better? And if you put some reading scores and things like that on a graph, what you can look for is going upness. You want to say, if my child was performing here in December, it's now February, are we seeing a trend in improved scores, meaning, which translate to improved skills with my child. And I think later in this series we're going to talk a lot more in depth about progress monitoring in a different webinar. But the general idea is that you want to make sure that the specific skills that are needing to be strengthened are targeted, and that somebody's measuring whether or not those skills are getting strengthened, indeed getting strengthened, and how is that information going to be communicated to you so that you can see, how well your child is improving. In general, if a child is reading at grade level, it's still the minimal expectation is that all kids would be assessed about 3 times a year just to make sure that they're on track. If it's found that your child is a little bit behind in reading, it's good to have their progress monitored at least monthly, meaning that they would be, assessed to determine how they're doing, and that information can be shared with you. If your child's 2 grade levels more behind in their reading performance, that child is needing some intensive reading support, and their progress should really be monitored and shared with you about weekly. And this is the standard that is communicated by Florida Center for Reading Research, by my Blissey, and by most of the major organizations that are looking at supporting struggling readers. Now, if you have a child who's not met their goals, this is what we just talked about, then evidence-based intervention may be needed. And so the progress monitoring is measuring if the plan is working. Evidence-based interventions are usually what the plan would be. And what we mean by that is interventions that have some research behind them, that if they are implemented the way that they were intended to be implemented, that you can expect to see some gains, with most children as someone moves forward. Some examples of evidence-based interventions are on What Works Clearinghouse, and we're talking about, a lot of times they're marketed programs like SRA programs like Reading Mastery or Read Naturally, and you might hear that a child is experiencing or benefiting from an intervention like that at your school. But the big questions are not, can my child have reading mastery or another specific intervention? The big questions parents need to know about are, is the intervention that's been selected working, and how and when will we, meaning the teacher and I, anybody on the IEP team, know? And so we really want to look at asking for data in order to answer those 2 big questions. One of the other things that we want to keep in mind is that you need about 3 data points in order to determine a trend. And so if you aren't getting data frequently enough to know the trend, then that's something to ask for. And if you have a child who is reading at a level that where he or she needs intensive support, and you have 3 data points that indicate you're not going anywhere, then it's time to really start asking about, well, is this intervention effective? Why or why not? Because if you think about it, if you get, even with a child who has intensive support needs and they're getting progress monitored every 3 or every week, that's almost 1/10 of the year that has gone by before you're able to really even determine if the intervention is working. So we really want to help get some of this kind of stuff written into IEPs so that that information is being shared on a regular basis. And that is what it is that we have going on. I'm not sure if there are any questions.
As Mary said, she is joining us for another webinar. It's scheduled for April 18th, and that will be all about progress monitoring and how to track progress. So if you have any questions after the webinar, you can contact us at info@michiganallianceforfamilies.org, and your questions will reach one of the parent mentors that works for Michigan Alliance for Family. And again, if you click back to our website, we have lots more information on reading, and then Mary's webinar from today will be up on our website by Monday. So we have no other questions. When the webinar ends, remember a short survey will pop up and be available to you. And we ask that you please fill it out. And thank you for attending our webinar today. If you haven't liked us yet on Facebook, please do so.